Could we go over real quick? So how I could set this up on my computer and then load everything up to a server, and so that I could get it running and test it. So does that make sense? I just need to know the steps that I'll need to go through to be able to make it work on my own machine.
Let's just go through something real quick, okay? So we'll create this first. So let's go all the way back to the beginning where we started. So I created this directory on my computer, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I make dir-p, I started it, and then I go into this directory, and this is where my server is going to be initially. So I'll just cat this again. I've got an npmrc, and it looks something like this.
npmrc is what again? Sorry.
We haven't got there yet.
Okay.
So this is just a file I create that tells npm a little about myself.
Okay, so in this directory you're making an npm file.
Actually, it's in my home directory. It's /. Let me just switch my address over to a .com. I bought the .com, I just haven't done anything with it. And then that's not, I have no idea what that password is. It's probably like password or something. I was doing a demo. I was doing a demo earlier, and so I created this file with just bogus data in it.
Okay, so you're editing this file that you just. Okay, I'm not sure what you just did. You created a file that had information for your.
This is just for npm. So because we're using Node.js, that's why this is important. That's the only reason this is important. If you're using Ruby or using Python, you don't do this. You do something else.
Well, I'm happy to use Node.
Yeah.
I think Node would be good. So npm is what? It's the
npm package manager.
Okay. So npm, you wrote a little module for npm so that it knows how to do something?
It's a configuration file. So
okay.
you'll see in just a second. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So I'm going to do npm init to basically start this application. And I think I already created a package.json by mistake. Oh no, I didn't. Good. So I'm going to do npm init, and then it's going to ask me what is the name of this package, and it's going to guess that it is the
first,
whatever the folder name was.
Right.
Right. And then it's going to say what's the description for this, like. It's a demo for Brian, so he can learn. And what's the version? Sure. And then if this is already on GitHub, then it will guess some of this information, like Git repository. And then, since I tend to make a lot of apps, that's why I did this step here, because it pulls from npmrc to guess what my name is, and to guess what my email and my URL. And then module entry point for me is always libindex, because that's where I put it. And that's the JSON file it creates. And it creates that as package.json. So this describes the application.
Okay.
So
so was it what did you call that file?
So it called it package.json. That's the standard name. Like in Ruby, they call it like config.yaml or something.
Okay.
And in Python, it's probably also config.yaml, or the YML is used very commonly for config files. It's actually the same thing as JSON, except that instead of brackets, it uses whitespace.
Okay.
So like it's required to pretty print YAML like this, but it looks more like, how does it look? Like this. So you don't have that. I forget what it is for an object.
It's okay.
But anyway, YAML is just even easier to read for humans than JSON is, but it's not as good for computers because it doesn't compress as well.
Okay. Let's stick with JSON.
Yeah.
Okay, so you made a directory called library.
So lib, yeah.
And
then
that's within the directory you made for
Yeah, so
Brian
I'm-
Awesome something.
yeah, so I'm in this directory, so pwd shows you where I am,
Okay.
right? So I'm going to touch lib index.js.
Touch means create new.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's basically what it does. And so I'm going to go into lib index.js and open it up. And then I've got just the standard boilerplate that I put in here. And actually, this is something I highly, highly, highly recommend, especially if you're using Vim. But there's things like it for other editors as well. There's this plugin for Vim called Syntastic. Let me just get to the place where I copy and paste. Yeah, I think this should be it. First, I don't know if I've installed Pathogen. So I'll just double check. But I think you have this installed for when you edit Jade or you use TextMate.
I use TextMate.
Yeah, so for TextMate there's a similar plugin. You just have to Google JS Hint and TextMate. Yeah, so here it is, right here. So it's going to be a similar set of instructions. You download the zip file, and then double click on it to open it in TextMate, and then it's going to do the same thing that I'm showing you with Vim.
So it's going to apply like colors and different things so that you know how to read it better.
And it's also going to give you errors.
Okay.
So, oops, that did not work the way I was hoping this would. Okay, so now I've got Pathogen installed, and now I'm going to install Syntastic. Oh, should have gone to the GitHub page where the documentation is pretty. Ah, there we go. Much better. Okay. Okay, cool. So I've already got some of this stuff on. Great. So I'll just close out of this real quick, and then open it back up again. And this JS hint line that I'm adding up to the top is just telling it a little bit about the style of how I write my code, and then that way it'll give me errors when I write bad code.
Okay.
So let's say I forget to assign my variable or declare my variable, then see it says down here A is not defined, and it gives me an indicator where the error is. And so this is a plugin that I just love to have because whenever I make typos, like let's say I forget to use strict, I think it will. Oh, it didn't. Yeah. So down there it tells me that I'm missing use strict.
Okay.
So it's just really nice because whenever you do a typo or you forget something, it's like, hey, you forgot to do this.
Okay. You're writing JavaScript right now.
Yeah. So this is JavaScript, and this JS hint is just for use with Syntastic and JS hint. So previously, I had done this npm install -g JS hint, and you would do this as well on your computer if you haven't already. And that will install JS hints so that when you're using the TextMate plugin or the Vim plugin or the Emacs plugin or whatever, that you'll get similar notifications when you have errors.
Okay.
So that takes away a lot of frustration because in JavaScript some of the errors are silent, and so it's like you pull your hair out because you're like, why doesn't this work? And it's because there's silent errors. And that's one of the reasons people hate JavaScript is because traditionally it's been a very terrible language. And it's only been recently that people put effort into making it really good. You know, like the past 5 years probably.
Cool.
So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and connect is just the name of this module that I'm going to use for doing the server. And I actually have my own that goes on top of Connect called Steve, but we won't use
Let's
that
not
for
worry
this
about
simple
that.
example.
Yeah. So Connect is something that where are you putting Connect? Is it in the directory like that you created? For
So
me,
let's just go on for a minute here, and then I'll address your concerns. So there's going to be the Connect app, and then there's going to be the Connect server. And I don't know why there's even a difference between the two. But I call Connect like this. That creates my Connect app. I'm going to do app.use, and then Connect comes with some built-in plugins. And one of them is static. So I'm just going to do, and I want to write code that's going to run on Windows and Linux and Mac and everything. So most of the time, when you're just programming for Linux, you do something like this. You just say / you add the dir name. This is something that Node provides, and it's saying whatever the directory is where this thing is running right now. Well, actually, wherever it is that the file is located. But anyway, I would do like this, and I'd put my HTML files in public, right?
Yes.
But that won't necessarily work on Windows, and I want to create this module so that it would work on Windows if we ever decided to run it on Windows.
Okay.
Which, maybe for some reason we want to, right? So I'll use path.join instead, and what path.join does is if it's on Windows, it's going to put a backslash, the weird way,
Okay.
and if it's on any operating system, then it's going to put a /.
Okay.
Like it is on the operating systems. And then I'm getting an error here because of the use of static, because I'm using ES5 JavaScript, and I need to let it know that that's the case. Because static used to be a reserved word, which, and reserved word in a programming language means something like var or function. Like I can't do var equals 1.
Right.
Because, well, that
it already has some meaning.
Yeah, that should have thrown an error. The fact that it didn't scares me. Let's see. Oh my goodness, it may be that in the new specification of the language that they've made these not keywords anymore. But this one definitely should be. I would be very surprised if this code were to run. That should be giving me an error. We'll just ignore that for now. Anyway. So what this is saying is I'm just going to statically serve content out of the directory called public. And I'll create that directory in just a moment. And I'll do server equals app.listen. And
so the server, you're creating a server on my machine that is called app.listen.
That's not the name of the server. The server doesn't necessarily have a name, but app is the variable name where the thing is. And when I call app.listen, it returns the server object.
Okay.
It just suffices to say it just gives me information.
Okay.
At the end. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this so. Commonly, when people are doing development, they put it on port 3000.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is the port is equal to this is the second argument, but it's actually the first. Let me just show that real quick. So node right here, this is argument 0.
Okay.
And then if I give it a file like my app.js, that's argument 1, and then whatever I give to this would be argument 2. So foo would be argument 2, my app.js would be argument 1, and node is argument 0.
Okay.
So over here, what I'm saying is give me the second argument if it exists, and that will be port, or give me the environment variable port, or give me 3000.
Okay.
And so, whoops. So I'm going to tell it to listen on port so it doesn't choose something at random.
Right.
And so this is a little bit of a boilerplate here, so you just have to bear with me.
That's cool.
It's just, this is basically how I set up every app that I create.
So this is just, these are steps I'll just have to go through and do from this.
And I'll just explain it real quick when we're done here. Okay, so server console.log. Actually, let me see if I can. No, that's not going to work. Okay. Do it this way. Meh. I do this all the time, yet it still takes me a second to figure out what I'm doing.
It's really fun.
Okay, so this is basically the most basic app that you get for a web server that is complete. So I'll just go through here real quick. Explain. So Connect is the web server framework I'm using, or the application stack framework. Because a web server, really all it is just those headers that we looked at before, wherever those went.
Right.
I'll just close out of this. I'm not using it anymore. But okay, I won't show that again. But
It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, right there. So a web server, all it does is just send out these headers in a file.
Okay.
That's a web server. Anything that does more than that is an application server, really.
Okay.
So Connect is an application server, but it does file serving as well with this static module.
Okay.
And so
is Connect is something that you just created?
Well, it's a module that already exists.
Okay.
But I'm requiring it.
Okay.
So, like, I could have done this. I could have required the HTTP module, and I could do the same thing, except the HTTP module doesn't have as good of defaults.
Okay.
Like, you have to do more work with it.
All right.
Connect is just like the really simple version of what 90% of people are going to want to use when they're doing a really simple application that they can build on top of.
Okay. Makes sense.
And then the HTTP module is like if you want to hand roll your own, like you really want to get down there and munge it. And then there's another one that's built on top of Connect called Express, which is more of a full application stack.
Okay.
And it has like Jade support built in and like all this other stuff, but I don't like that one because I don't use my applications the way it does.
Sure.
Anyway, so this connect.static, like I said, it's going to look for files in that directory and it's going to return them if they're there. And then this whole main function, the reason I do this is my index.js is going to work as a module and an application. So what's going to happen is there's a couple magic variables here, and I'll just go ahead and outline those real quick. These are the magic variables: require, dir name, module, exports. See, is there anything else that's magic here? Process. And the reason I say these are magic is because these are things that aren't part of JavaScript, but Node makes them available.
Okay.
So just like in the browser, you have things like window,
right,
and documents and some other things that they just come out of nowhere. You're like, where the heck did that come from? They're part of the browser. These things are part of Node.
Okay.
But the good news is that most of these can be emulated in the browser, and that's why it's easy to take Node packages from npm and install them in a browser environment.
Okay.
Anyway, so moving right along. So what I'm saying here is that if if this module is the one that's being run, then it's going to treat it like an application because it's going to call this main function that I created.
Okay.
And if not, well, in all cases, I'll do module.exports equals app. So
Where's
if
app defined? Server equals app.
this right here.
Okay.
So I'm creating a connect app.
Okay.
And so what this means is if I require this from something else, then it's not going to start the server. It's going to let me configure it or do whatever and then start the server. But if I just call this directly on its own, then it's going to start the server.
Okay.
So it's just kind of a nice pattern. And so this starting the server here is just, I call listen on a port. And actually, I can go ahead and move this down into here because this is actually where it makes more sense because it doesn't get used anywhere else. So where that port is either a number I pass it or something I'd specified in the environment or the number 3000.
Okay. And
then when it listens, so when the server is ready, then it's going to call this function and I'm going to get the address of it, and the address contains both the IP address and the port number. And I'm just going to log that to the screen. So exit out of here. This is the simplest web server ever. I'll go ahead and make that public directory, and I'm going to go ahead and put in that public directory an index.html.
Okay.
Or I guess.
Yeah. That's good.
So I'll do index.jade so I don't have to type so much.
Yes.
Oops, and that needs not to be make error, but then. Okay, so bang, bang, bang. 5, HTML, body, and check this out. Let's see if this works. Oh, maybe it doesn't do it with this one. Okay, I'll have to get a syntactic plugin for.
But it gives you all the.
But like it'll tell you like if you forget to put a title, it'll be like you didn't put your title.
Okay.
So there's like plugins for that kind of stuff. Really cool. Anyway, Brian's awesome app. The body. Welcome to Brian's awesome app. I just found out about this. We'll see if it works right now. But supposedly, if you put the dot, you don't have to do the pipes.
Oh, that'd be great.
Because that was a pain point for somebody. They're like, "Oh, Jade's so hard because I have to use the pipes," and I'm like text heavy. I'm like, "Well, I'm not text heavy, so it hasn't been a problem for me." But
yeah.
All right, cool. So now.
So you rendered index.html.
Yep, and now now we'll just go ahead and run this. Oh, there is one mistake I've made so far. I actually, instead of running from dir name, which would be lib, I'm going to run from let's call this base dir is going to be process.cwd. So that means the directory I'm actually in right now. And then realistically, I'd want to be able to like pass that in somehow or something, but just for this, because if I did this, then the index.html file would have had to been under public inside of lib. But now I'm saying, well, don't do it inside the directory where the file is. Do it in the directory where I am. And since where I am, there's directory public.
So
it's going to read into the directory where I am to find public.
So that means if I'm in a different directory, it won't work.
Yeah. So if I were to move to a different directory, and I go node Brian awesome app lib index.js. And actually, I think I can just do this. Let's see. It'd be interesting to see if this works. Because it has the package.json, so it knows where the main is. Yeah. So I don't even have to do that.
Okay, cool.
Just because it knows where main is, because in package.json it says main is libindex.
Okay.
But anyway, so it would be looking for public right here, and there's no public here.
Okay.
Right? So we go back in here, I'll ls the public directory. You see there's 2 files in there. And so now we have the most basic web server that we could pretty much have. And I think if I just do /, yeah. So it knows, because of package.json saying main is libindex, it knows to load it. I didn't give it a port number, so it loads it on 3000. Let's say I do want to give it a port number. then I could say 4, bam. Then I go here to my browser.
So the port is actually, is it like someplace on your computer?
It's not a place. It's just an access point.
Okay.
So yeah, so I go here. It's kind of like knocking on the door. It's part of that.
Okay.
The port is part of TCP. It's part of knocking on the door.
Okay.
It's basically the room number of the door.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah. So so here, instead of seeing the HTML file, what I see is the DOM.
Right.
Because if I was going to see the HTML file, well, that would look a lot more like this.
Yeah.
Right?
Uh-huh.
But because the browser has taken that blueprint and constructed the DOM, instead I see this.
Right.
And I think most people are already familiar with that, but that's how that process kind of happens.
Okay.
So I'll start the server again, and then like I could explicitly go to index.html. It finds
That's
it.
where it is. Yeah.
And then I could go to index.jade. It downloads the Jade file.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I could go to something else like no one is home, and then I get the default error message.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so here's our basic web server.
Okay. So do we create the JSON file in the same directory that we have, like the Jade and HTML file?
The package.json. The package.json goes at the root of the application or module.
Okay.
So
is this database that we were looking at?
Oh, that?
Kind of like working on it earlier.
we get to decide where we want to put it. We haven't decided yet.
Okay.
Because we haven't done anything with it.
Right.
So before I get too much further in, I'm going to make a directory browser source, and then I'm going to move the Jade file into there.
So that it doesn't interfere with stuff, or just
Yeah,
so it's separate.
So that our public directory is just clean. All it is our compiled files.
Okay.
Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a deploy script. So this script is only going to work on Linux and Mac because it's a shell script.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure how to go about writing a script like this on Windows at this time. Oops. But anyway, so...
Are you doing this so that if you do Jade to Jade files, it'll put it in the right directory?
Well, that's what I'm going to tell it to do right now.
Yeah.
So in this deploy, I'm going to say, well, you should do npm install to install whatever modules there are. Oh, and that's something, I have to go back to that real quick, but I'll do that in a second. So push D, and then I'll do browser source. And you don't have to indent, I just like to for clarity's sake. And then I'll do Jade index.jade, and then I'll do move index.html into public. Also, one thing I always start with, actually we just need -a. I like to create a directory called static, which will have like images and stuff in it that I do want to store in my repository, but not things like the database where they be written to or changed by users.
Oh, okay. So like your logo, or or button icons, things like that.
Yeah. So I like to put all that in static, so that static will get synced to public.
Okay. So mv index.html. What if you have other Jade files, like you have gallery.jade?
Well, it will include that into the main Jade file, right?
Okay.
So this application will be one single page. When the user visits that page, it downloads the entire application all at once.
Okay. Cool.
So and then I'll have my less, which is just like Jade, in the sense that it's just a simple compiler. And I've already got less installed. So I guess maybe I should put some instructions in here for people that aren't familiar. And I'm not actually going to use CoffeeScript, but I think it's great. I think this one actually has a hyphen in it. I'll copy this and try this real quick, because these are all the things that we're going to use in this deploy script. looks like less C, right? Because it's actually called less, not less C. So, boom, all that got installed successfully, and those are all the little NPM modules that I'm using as part of the development environment. And I need to get rid of some of these tabs just because.
Those are installed globally, right?
Yeah,
It's
so
sudo.
well, in the -G. So yeah,
Dash
it's
G.
installed globally. Okay. So then, oh, and then I forgot about Pakmanager for the JavaScript. Pakmanager build, and then uglify. I think this one installs. Yeah, it installs without the hyphen. Pakmanage.js goes to pakmanage.min.js. So for our development environment, we won't actually use that right off, but then we want to. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and leave this out for now.
So when you do MV, that moves it. It doesn't keep a copy, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
So
we've
whenever if I had style.jade, and then I made it into CSS somehow, or if it was index.jade, then it automatically, whenever it sees that, it'll just punch it over to public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're just getting a basic setup here where we're inside of our browser source directory will be all of our source files,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll take all the compiled files that are built for the application. We'll put them in the public directory.
So every time, let's say, every time I add a new page or a new type of style or something else that I want to put in the public directory, do I have to edit that file?
No, because everything will go. You'll just do the Jade includes.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead and do that. So I've got my Jade file in here. I'll go ahead and make a style.less, and then maybe just do something really simple like I don't know, just get this zeroed out, margin 0, padding 0. What else do you got to do to the body to reset it?
Oh, margin padding.
You're the CSS guru here.
Yeah. I don't know. Other than that, margin padding.
And then I guess like we could have an at imports. This is where we give it like I'll just call this home. Right? I think that's how this works. So I'll just go ahead and style sheets, style sheets, home.less, and then I'll just say the ID home gets a background color of blue, and maybe I don't know. It's kind of what's a good color? You know any off the top of your head?
Oh, like hex numbers?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let's go with let's go with CC7. That'll probably turn out to be like pink or something.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, so we'll just go in each of these one by one, and we'll do the thing where it includes it. So style sheets home. I think that's how we do this. I don't think that goes in there. All right. So just real quick, I'll try this to make sure that that works. So style.less should go into style.css. Okay, it looks like it worked, and then I'll just open up real quick to make sure. Yeah, so it imported that as expected. And I wonder, are we allowed to adjust where the imports go? Are they allowed to be not on top? It'd be interesting to see if this works. Oh, cool. So the imports with less don't have to go at the top. They can go wherever you want to import, just like with Jade.
That's good.
So then I'll do like pages, or I like to call it tabs. And then I want to do under tabs, I'll make a home.jade. And then here's where we'll do our home. This is my home. I love it here so much. So nothing fancy going on, but then let's just compile that real quick. Look at the output, make sure that it's got what we expect. Oh, I forgot to edit the Jade file to do the include. So I think the syntax is just like this, right? Like tabs home. Is that right?
I don't remember the include syntax. Let's see.
Yeah, it looks like that was it. So look in the HTML here. This is my home. I love it so much. Cool, great. So we've got the includes working on both of those. And then what was the third thing that we needed? Okay, and then there's the JavaScript, which has the requires. So here,
what requires again?
To pull in the modules. It's the same thing as includes.
Okay.
So Jade calls it include, Les calls it import, JavaScript calls it require.
Okay.
Well, at least this flavor of common JS JavaScript that we're going to manage with Pakmanager.
Okay, so requires, and Jade calls them includes, and import is for less.
Yeah. So, and then I'm going to do the same thing in here that I did outside. So the outside was where the server was, and actually maybe let's make this a little bit clearer. In a minute, not right now. Okay, so I'm going to do this npm init, and that's going to create a package.json here. So we have one for the browser and one for the server.
Okay.
Right? And so this is going to be Brian Awesome App. Is that what we called it? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Brian Awesome App client.
So client goes on the browser.
Or say browser.
Browser. Let's do browser.
So yeah. So this is just a name. It's kind of arbitrary, but it's just part of that package. So this is the browser client for Brian Awesome App. And then again lib index. Okay, so then I again create a lib, and then again touch lib index, and then inside of here, same thing again.
Can you just copy that file?
Well, it's going to be different, right? So I'm not going to copy it verbatim. It's just same boilerplate. And then even though this isn't Node, because it thinks require is part of Node, it doesn't. JS Hint doesn't understand that browser packages use Node or use require as well yet. So I'll go ahead and put that in there. Well, I don't know that I need that yet. Okay. I guess I should have technically should put it here. Strict true. All right, and then this one's just gonna be really simple. I'm just gonna require home. Well, maybe I shouldn't call all these things the same because they don't really relate to one another. But heck with it. So I'll require home, and then I'll say home dot put welcome to my humble abode.
But you say like message or something like that instead of home.
Well, because this is going to interact with the home tab.
Okay.
So like this doesn't exist yet, right?
Right.
Like I just put that there, but it doesn't exist. Oh, and then I need to put here's something like or scripts. Oh wait, actually it goes under. Oh no, it just goes here because this is already in lib, so this is already the right place to put it. All right, so I go into lib, I create home.js. Actually, for this one, I will go ahead and take the shortcut of copying the other thing. And I always tell people not to use CP and to use rsync instead, so I need to follow that myself. Sometimes I forget. There's just minor differences between the two. Rsync is more consistent and behaves properly all the time. Okay, so yeah, what I'll do here is I'll create this function. Home. Well, I guess really in this case, what I want to do is exports equals home dot put equals function. And let's see, I want var $ equals require ender. And so ender is just like jQuery, but it's more modular. So there we go.
So ender is that a program or a module, or is that?
It's just like jQuery.
Okay.
So like I'm going to be able to select home here and then do .text. And then pass it message. So all I'm doing is replacing the text that's in the HTML file by default with the text that's passed in here.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a contrived example, but we'll straighten this up and create a form where you can post things, and it'll make more sense. Okay, and we might have to like continue this next Saturday, because I think we're almost at a point where it'd be good to stop. But anyway, let's go ahead and finish up this simple application that we've got going, and maybe just get something where we can post some data. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
I'm getting a little tired though.
Yeah.
All right. So I think here, what I'm going to need to do is npm install -s. And the -s is so that it will put it in package.json.
Mm-hmm.
I need to install, let's see, Bean, Bonzo. These are all submodules of Ender because it's a little counterintuitive.
So I need to install that ender.
Well, you don't install Ender. That's the thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a little counterintuitive goofo with the way they did this. And I'm copying them, so I do it the same way they do it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you don't install Ender. That would not work at all.
Okay.
You install the modules that Ender uses.
Okay.
And that's like the only library that's like that. It's just a little bit weird.
Okay.
But yeah, Bean, Bonzo, let's see, Ender.js. See what the modules are. Okay. DOM ready query, and I think that for whatever reason they do it lowercase. They don't actually follow the same convention. Bean, Bonzo, query, DOM ready. Great. So those four. Okay. And now if I do Pakmanager build,
is Pakmanager something that...
it's a compiler like Jade and Lessar,
Okay.
but it's for JavaScript.
So I need to download Pakmanager.
Yeah, I think I put that in that one file.
Okay.
So, yeah, this whole big clump, these 2,300 lines, are all of like the Ender library stuff. So you can kind of see that, and then it finally gets down to here where our application is. So, like, here's the start of our application.
Right.
So it just concatenates these together. And then in the future I'll make this a little bit smarter so it factors out some things and whatnot. Because I'm the one that wrote Pakmanager. Cool. So it's still a few places I want to improve it. But anyway, and then if we were to uglify this, and then gzip it. So here's the difference between the file sizes. So it's 78K.
Jesus.
No, it's 78K is like what the file size is that's human readable. This is what you want to use for debugging.
Right.
But when it gets sent out to a browser, this is the size that it will end up being.
Okay.
And there's a compression thing in both Nginx and in Connect and in most web servers where files that end in .js and stuff, they'll compress and cache. Cool. So anyway, that was just the manual step of what I had done here with the deploy. So let me make this deploy executable and run it. Oh, whoops, something's wrong here. Okay, that makes sense. I did a JavaScript comment instead of a bash comment. Okay. Let's see. Oh, and then I don't actually have the directory called static yet, but I want to find a nice favicon. Let's just go whatever this is. Woo! And download, right? There's so many ads on here, I don't know how to download.
Just find one that exists.
Alright, cool. So, good idea. Amazon.com/favicon.io. And I will go into browser, and I'll go into static. Oops. And I will wget Amazon's. So our site will look like Amazon, but whatevs. Okay. And then, yeah, so now this whole deploy thing should work just as expected. Don't ever forget to use your favicon because there's like lots of weird things that can end up happening.
Right.
Oh, no, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, you want to use your own favicon, but just a favicon in general, you should always have a favicon no matter how simple your site is.
Okay.
Even if you're just grabbing one that's blank.
Okay.
Because the way web browsers work, every single time they request a page, they'll request a favicon. And if you got something where anytime there's not a page present, you like redirect them to your homepage, for example, it's going to like bog down your server when it starts to scale.
Interesting.
There was a really good talk on that at the Utah Open Source Conference. So quick plug, if you want to learn lots of computer-related topics, Utah's 2012. These are all the talks I've uploaded. Other talks are getting uploaded by other people soon, hopefully. There we go. Yeah. Love it. So some other people have started to upload their talks as well. That's great. I'm so happy to see that. Yeah, nice. So it looks like almost all the talks from Utah's 2012 have made it online at this point. So tons of really great stuff there. Oh, there's my talk that I did on ARM. Anyway. But there's a talk on performance in web applications, and he just talked about some bad cases where that'd become a problem. So now I'm gonna modify. I'm back here in the top level directory where my server is, because I want to make my application a little bit more understandable. I'm just gonna go back and put everything that's server related under server now, just so it's a little bit more clear what's going on. Okay, and then I'll edit, and I'll go ahead and I'll move this from just browser. Well, I guess that's good enough of a name. Okay, so now I'm gonna go into server, and I guess I can just node server actually, and then give it that port number from before. Oh, first I was going to modify this. Connect also has a module called Favicon. And what that does is it stores the favicon in memory, so it doesn't even look it up from the file system.
Which Vim showed the file name you added in?
Oh, it does. It's down there at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
Server lib index.js.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, so that just makes it so it efficiently puts the favicon out there. Let me close some of these tabs again. So many of them. Alright, localhost. Look, another example of caching.
Right.
Caches my queries. Alright, so this is my home. I love it here so much. Looks like that JavaScript didn't execute. It was supposed to. I took a look in resources and see, oh, there's no script tag, and there's no style tag. So go back into here and just add our script tag. So again, I'm using the development version, not the production version. So it's not the min version, whatever. And then, do you remember link? That one uses like ref, or like, is it like ref equals style sheets? How do link tags go?
I think it's source. SRC.
Is it SRC? I thought it was ref because, well, I know they're inconsistent between them. Okay, W3 Schools is one of the worst sites in the world to get documentation from. Avoid it at all costs if you can find someplace else. Use it. W3 Schools has tons of terrible examples of things that you shouldn't do. Of course, lots of other sites do too, but... Alright, so rel equals style sheet, ref, and then type. Okay, so it's ref equals... and this will be style.css is what we compile it to, and then I guess type equals text CSS. I don't think that type is actually necessary, but we'll put it in there for good measure anyway. So we got the script tag, we got the style tag. We'll redeploy the app and watch it fail. Can't read dependencies. Oh, I know why that is. Push the server. Cool. All right. So, oops, I wanted to do 4444. So you got your nice little Amazon favicon there. And then it looks like the file still isn't getting loaded. Welcome to my humble abode is what the text should be. I definitely see that's not what the text is. Let me just try goofing around a little bit. Oops. Let me make sure that I can in fact select home. Maybe I called it by a different name. And then if I do text, lar. Okay, so that's working. I'm going to go under the browser code again, take a look at index, console.log, app start, console.log, end of file. Then just go back in that directory, start deploy, and then start the server. And we could put a little watcher on here. I need to figure out what the watch module is called. I think it might actually be called watch or something, where you can basically just say anytime a file changes in the browser directory, then rerun this. Okay. Oh, I know it's not working. I know why. Okay, because I want to use DOM ready. Oh, this one is actually. I think it's this way. I guess we'll find out in just a second. Okay, so the reason it wasn't working is because before the DOM was ready, the JavaScript was already trying to work with the DOM. And unfortunately, most libraries like Ender and jQuery don't throw exceptions when there's an error. They just keep on chugging along, which I think is a terrible idiom. And one day I hope there's a library that throws an error instead so that you can immediately know without having to be an expert. Because I happen to know why that didn't work, but for you, it would have been something where you're like, forever.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wish those libraries would be a little bit kinder.
Yes. Sweet.
Okay, so
the DOM loads and then the JavaScript loads.
Yeah, well, the JavaScript's loading simultaneously, but what we do here with the DOM ready module is we just say, okay, we'll wait until for the DOM, the house is built, then start running this code, because there's lots of code that you can run before the house is built.
Right.
Before the DOM is completely structured. And so it's an optimization in the browser that there's this feature. It's just too bad that it looks like it runs and works, but then it actually is an error state.
Okay.
Okay, so that is like all the boilerplate of a complete app.
Cool.
Now, let's say, and I did want to show you something here. So package.json, when I installed those, it put them in the package.json and what version they're at.
Cool.
So every time you go to install this application, you'll always install everything with those same versions. And then same thing in the server. Actually, look, the server is missing the dependencies. So if I were to go into server and I were to remove the Node modules, which is really just JavaScript modules because browser modules end up getting installed under there as well. But if I were to remove that and then I were to run this application, it's going to complain at me. And then when I do npm install, it's not going to install anything because it's not actually listed in package.json. So one way to put it in package.json is when you install to do cat-S, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'll go into package.json and I'll put in here, connect, and then I happen to know the version because I was watching earlier. It's 2.2.x, and so now if I do npm install, well, yeah, I'll do npm install. This is also in the deploy.sh. And now if I try to run this module, bam, it works. Okay. So another thing I want to install in here is connect_router. For some reason they took this out of the new version of Connect, but it still works with the new version. So I just published it as a separate module. So I'll go in here, app.use connect_router. Connect. Oops. Router equals require. And the reason I did this funny underscore thing, which is what I wouldn't normally do that, I'd normally use a hyphen. Or, well, for files I don't use camel case, I use hyphens. But somebody already published it, and it wasn't the same thing. So I had to publish it under a different name than what I normally would have. Anyway, so what router does is it really lets us start building our app. And then in most examples, router is called app also. So maybe I should give it I don't know, maybe routes. I'll call it routes for disambiguation. So here, what router does is it calls this function and gives it a magic object that has the different verbs, so get, post, put, delete, and then gives you the resource that they're going to get called on. And then you create a bunch of functions that have a request and a response, which I like to abbreviate, but for now we'll spell it out just so it's a little simpler. So what router does is it gives you this thing called params, and the router only gets called for that if it matches. So it's going to be /greet, and then this colon is just, it turns it into a variable. So that colon name becomes request.params.name. And so my response might just be, and this is really terrible prototype code. I always send back JSON, but just for this really dirty, nasty example, I'm just going to send back plain text. And I'm not going to do anything fancy at all. And then we'll get to the database in just a minute here. Okay. So actually, yeah. So we'll start with this, and then I'll restart that server, and then it will then have this code. So do you understand what this is doing?
Not exactly.
Okay, so back to this stuff here. Get resource.
Right.
Okay, over here, I'm going to handle gets for this resource, where this actually must match, and this can be anything, and it will stuff it into a variable.
Okay.
So I'll just show you this example as it is.
Mhm.
and then the greeter is the handler. So I'm going to handle requests that are GET requests that match this resource that have something here. Could be anything, but we're going to call it name, and I'm going to handle it with greeter.
Okay.
And so in the request is where that request.params comes because we're using connect router and because we have a variable here.
Okay.
So if I do request.params.blob, it's going to be nothing. But request.params.name happens to be something because it's something here. Is that clear? Okay.
But if I put blob, :blob and .name, then it would work too.
So now if you put blob and then you change this to blob,
Yeah.
then it works.
Right.
So now that would work.
Okay.
But I'll just leave it at name. Okay, and I'll just cancel this server, redeploy, start it back up again. Shabam. So we can see it's still working, and then I'm going to do greet, and we're going to say hello to Brian. Hello, Brian.
Cool.
And you'll notice that this isn't this. So strange thing about HTML, the browser interprets everything as HTML, but it interprets it differently. Like this page still has a DOM. Like if I open it up, I can still see that it created a DOM, even though I gave back text that was not HTML. It turns it into HTML anyway.
Okay.
So unless a browser knows how to handle what you're giving it differently, it will always treat it as HTML.
Okay.
And it will create a body for it.
Cool.
And in this case, it's saying, well, I think that the person meant this to look like code, and so I'm gonna put it in a pre. And so every browser could handle this differently. This happened to put it in a font that looks like font for code. But all of them can handle it differently. So now let's go back here. Oh, and so I wanted to show you that if I do greet and I don't hand it anything, can't get it.
But if you put something there.
And if I put something there, I can get it. But if I put too much there, can't get it.
But if you put that without the slashes, or...
Yes.
Okay.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's how the route works. And like the biggest part of learning to code isn't really learning to code. It's learning to use modules. Because 90% of everything that you want to do has already been done.
Right.
And you just have to know the right people and be in the right community to be like, hey, I want to do this. How do I do it? And then, you have to look at documentation. And in the end, using somebody else's code and writing your own code, they take about the same amount of time. But in a lot of cases, it's just better to use other people's code. In some cases, it's better to write your own. And you just kind of got to play it by ear. Anyway, so now I'm going to change this so I have first and then last. And then...
How do you create new windows? Am I turning
it's just Command T.
Okay.
We'll open up a new tab.
Cool.
Okay, so now I've modified this function.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to rerun it again. And so, da-da-da-da, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are the very basics. Now we're going to store this stuff in a database. And so when you're modifying data on the server, technically this should have been a post, because we're actually we're processing that data, not to give you something that we have, but to give you something new. So it was like creating that string. But anyway, now we'll get into the database, and we'll just do a simple JSON database. So we'll require file system, and then DB will be fs.readFileSync db.json. Let's see, how do we want to do this? This is the best way. And so generally in JavaScript, it's bad to use sync, but it's appropriate when it's the very first thing you're going to do as part of your module, and it's like a one-time action.
Okay.
Like, for example, you want to read in a file. It would not be appropriate to use a sync if it was in one of these response type things. Like to do fs.readFileSync here would be bad. But here, since we want to always have the database before the server starts, this makes it a lot simpler because we're not going to, like, it's not like it can do anything else in the meantime.
Okay.
It's not like it can be efficient and handle a request before the server is ready.
Right.
You know, we don't want the server to be ready until the database is ready.
Right.
So this will be just like and I'm just going to add one layer of protection on here because files are prone to corrupt. So I'm just going to assume that there's going to be a backup file, and then if this is new and we've never created it before, then it'll be like this. So I guess actually, I should factor this out into a database abstraction layer. So like create another module. In fact, I don't want to do it right now.
Okay.
But what I should do is either use a database abstraction that's already available, or just write my own module where I handle the saving of this.
Okay.
So that we're not just like assuming that it's always going to be a JSON database, because one day it won't be, and then this code will be really annoying because we'll have to go back and fix it.
Right.
But so for right now, I'm just going to create this function called saveDB where we pass it the DB, and it's just going to do fs.writeFileSync JSON.stringify, and then again, this would not work for large files because JSON.stringify, when you get larger than like 20 megs, it starts to not be efficient.
Okay.
But anyway, so I've got that, and then I think.
So you're saying that you're stringifying the information from the file. So let's say I do upload a really large file. How would we handle that?
Well, you'd save it on the file system.
Okay.
And that's kind of like for another day.
Sure.
Yeah, try to catch me next Saturday and see if I've got the energy to do this again.
Definitely.
Because we can pick up from here and we can add more stuff, but
right.
It's like it's all about the modules from this point.
Right.
You know, we've got the basic thing down. Now it's all about like getting a file read module and blah 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 blah. But what was I going to look up? Yeah, so I'm going to go on the Node documentation page, look up file system module, and see what the parameters for write file are. Because for some reason I don't have them memorized yet. So it's file name, then data, then encoding. So this will be db file equals base dir plus, nope, not plus, path.join. That way this will work even on Windows. And then we'll just call it like db.json. And then likewise we'll do a db file back. And so when we save to the database, you don't want to do a write file sync, that would be bad. We'll first save db file. I think first we want to save db file back. And then here, let's see, I'll go back to this and save db. And then when that is complete, and that's been successful, so if error, just want to throw the error, but otherwise, oops, what did I do that for? There we go. Or do we want to write it to the file first and then the backup file? I don't know. So there's different ways we could go about doing this, but this is just like some very minor fault tolerance. So if you turn the power off, it won't start writing the backup file until it's written, or it won't. Yeah, let's just change this around a little bit, because then that makes sense, especially with what I got up there. So if we turn the power off right while this thing's running, and it was in the middle of writing the file, well, here we've got our function load db, and I'll just indent this. There we go.
What's the hotkey for indenting like that?
I did 1-0 shift, and then the angle bracket.
Okay.
So then it indented 10 lines, and I just am so good at line counting that I don't have to count anymore. That's not really true. I happen to get the right number sometimes, because I got a general feel for how long the code is. But anyway, so we've got this load DB and this save DB, and the way that it works is that when we start our application, we'll call load DB. And what that will do is it'll try to load the JSON file if that fails, because like say the power got turned off right as we were writing it and it's a corrupt file. Then it'll try to load the backup. And then if loading the backup fails, most likely it doesn't exist, so we'll just create one and then save it. And we save it, we first save to the regular file, and then we save to the backup.
Okay.
So that if it becomes corrupt while we're turning it off, the original file, which has the new data, will become corrupt.
Right.
But then the backup file will still be okay. And then when we restart the application after the power failure, if it can load the original file and that file is okay, but let's say the backup file was corrupted because it powered off while the backup file was being written, not by the regular file was being written, well, when we turn it back on, it'll rewrite both files immediately as soon as it
turns on.
Yeah. And so, like, this is not really fault tolerant, because there are definitely cases where you could cause this to corrupt, and depending on your file system, it might get corrupted anyway, because some file systems, like, they optimize and they don't save until, like, every 30 seconds or, you know, weird stuff like that.
Right.
But it's just something. So for, like, 90% of the normal use cases that will happen, like your server crashes while it's in the middle of a file write, or you lose power. For most of the cases, this will, well, first of all, in most cases, your server is going to crash when it's not writing. And then most of the cases where it crashes where it's writing, like this is good enough.
Right. Cool.
So it's important to bring up that, but a database that isn't a flat text file is going to have this stuff built in, like Couch, Redis, Mongo. They're all going to have options for, how long can you go before it's considered safe. Like maybe Couch has a configuration option where every 30 seconds it ensures with perfect certainty that everything's written to disk. And so, it's just a give and take. It's like, how long do you want to wait between ensuring that things are properly saved? Because if your server goes down and somebody was in the middle of uploading an image, so they got to wait a minute, they got to re-upload it,
Right. Yeah,
whatever.
Exactly.
But that's the logic there. And so then let's go ahead and make a database route here. What is this thing complaining about? Oh, spelling typo. So we'll make a getDB function, and we'll make a putDB function. And the getDB will just oops. Here I'm going to abbreviate res. So we'll do res.in, json.stringify. I guess we could do res.set header, I think, is part of this content type. We just want to let the browser know, like, hey, this is not HTML, this is JSON. So we set the header, and then we just want to stringify the database. You know, for very small databases, this is going to work. So, you know, there's a little demo app. We're fine. And then, so for putDB rec res, I'm going to need to add a body parser where we've got our connect stack here. So before we get to router, I'm going to do connect.json. And what that does is it parses incoming JSON. And it also puts on the request object, it puts a body. So we'll have rec.body save db rec.body. That's if rec.body. And then we just send back a message. I like to always do this, success is true. Because sometimes if you check for error and there was an error, then error will be empty because the nature of the error may have prevented you from setting error. So I like to have this paradigm of success true, because if you do if success and there was an error that caused the error not to be generated somewhere in your application stack and you get back an empty object, well, at least that empty object won't have success in it.
Right.
So it's just a better checking mechanism, I feel.
Cool.
All right, so, and then I need to modify savedb so that after it does all of this, that db is equal to db. So this, actually, I'm going to change this to underscore db. And then after it's saved, I'm going to assign that back up to the global DB. Does that make sense?
After.
So I was passing in rec.body, which is whatever we're getting from the browser. But then I have this variable called db that I hand back when I do getDB. And so after this is saved to file, then I'm going to update it in memory.
Okay.
And then, you know, maybe I should actually update it in memory first or whatever, but who cares at this point? Okay. So, and then even here, like, let me do this. Data equals, I'll do this object, oops, with success true, and then result would be db. Nope, I don't want that there. And then I'll just go back to data. Okay. So let's see if this works. And it may break right now. It may break later. What was that under? Oh, we didn't attach it to anything, did we? Okay, so underneath my routes, what routes? Get /db, get db, and then I'll just leave this get actually, and then
Got it. Okay.
I'll do both put and post, because yeah, there's some people argue about what those should be. I think in a lot of cases they're the same. In a lot of cases they're different too, but because like technically you have to post first to create it, and then you have to put to replace the contents, and then like there's supposed to be this new one called patch that where you want to do like incremental delta updates to things, but still kind of a point of argument in the community. Anyway, so what I expect to get here now, if I go to DB, will be that empty object because the file hasn't been created yet. Cool. And now we should see, if I go into here, we have JSON and the DB JSON and the DB JSON.back. See? So now we have a rudimentary, ugly database.
Cool.
And then we can modify the browser code. Oops, let me get back up into browser land. And I'll go under tabs and home. And then I'll just create a form. And I'll have a text area. Okay, I'll do it the right way. Input name equals first. Name equals last. And I actually have a module that will parse forms like this, but I'm just going to do it by hand for fun. Description. And then the file uploading. The way I handle file uploading is I first post the metadata.
That makes sense. And then
and
upload
then
the content.
And so I'll get back an ID when so my form will see like, oh, this, like I know this person wants to upload a file, so in the response, like as the result to the response, I'll give back the ID where the file can go, and then they can post to that ID. And I like that a little bit better just because files are handled differently than other types of data. And so it just makes it nice and clean so you can still keep your JSON and whatnot. But then on the user interface, like the user interface doesn't necessarily have to change. The user interface, they can still have the file in the form, but you can just put the other form fields separately from the file. And this would be of type file. Let's just do it this way. And this would be of type equals tel. I think that's what it is. It'd be interesting to see how the browser reacts to this. They have these elements, tel and email, so that when you're on a phone, yeah, it'll give you the right keyboard.
Cool.
Send me all your datas. And I'll call this form something like contact form. And then in the JavaScript, where did I put that? What did I call it? Lib. For my home thing, I'll go ahead and I'll attach on the body, and I will listen to contact form for a submit event, and when I get that submit, I will submit form. I guess This is broken still, but let me go back and change that real quick. I should have something like label for equals first, and BR. And then the label should be first, and then last.
Oh, it's that way you can have text to the side.
Yeah. Oops, and that is lowercase l. And then here, I might do something like placeholder equals IE johndoe@gmail.com. Oops, what did I do there? No, go back. Maybe +1. So in the United States. Yeah, so it goes. And this label stuff is like for accessibility. So, like if somebody's handicapped and there's a screen reader, or if like some devices that do screen reading, just as part of their normal function, they'll look for labels, and they'll like even if the label is in a different area than the input field is, it'll attach it to it so that when it screen reads, it does it properly.
Okay.
Thingamabob. Right. Okay, so now I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to create a scrape function, and I'm going to create an post db function, or I guess alright, so with scrape, I'm just going to return an object with first, last, tell, what was the other thing?
File name or something?
File, yeah, I won't do file quite yet. I won't get into that today. What else? Tell, first, last, tell, email. Yeah.
Phone. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, stop. And I guess actually, I'll just do this. And a convention I haven't used until recently, which is why I forgot to do it, is putting a $sign in front of things that are handled by a library.
Okay, so you can identify them.
Yeah, that way you know it's a DOM thing, like it's a DOM abstraction rather than like normal JavaScript. Okay, anyway, so it'll be like find input name equals first. And like I said, there's like form serializers that exist. I don't know what the one that comes with Ender is called, and I don't want to install the one I have right now. Which is part of the problem with JavaScript. Like, it seems like you got to have a library to do anything in it, which is definitely a telltale sign that there's a problem in the language. But a lot of people aren't really like that are big names in the community. They're not really willing to admit to it. They're like, it's a fine language, blah 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 blah, and they just, for whatever reason, yeah, they just. Oh, I guess I do need to do this.
So
they don't care. Email. Okay, and then I've got put db and var new db equals scrape, and then I'm going to do request dot put /db, and then I don't have any query parameters for this, but I do have the data, which is new db, dot when and then you should never ever ever use alerts. But I do sometimes when I'm doing nasty dirty code like this live on screen. So I'm going to use, for my request, I'm going to use the AHR 2 actually. See, it complains to me. You know what, I'm going to take that alert out just because it's complaining. I don't want to have that nasty error. Successful, maybe, probably. Another thing I've trained myself to do is to return out of sequences like as quickly as possible, or blocks, I mean, so that I don't end up with code indented like 5,000 layers deep.
Right.
And then if I realize like, hey, I'm not actually using anything from that scope, then I'll just take that function and pull it out into a different scope.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times, you know, you actually use object-oriented programming instead of ad hoc programming, and things are better with that too. Because like a lot of people, they'll do something like if data, and then they'll have like their whole huge long block of what they do. And really, what's better to do in most cases, in this case it doesn't matter because I'm only doing one thing, but in most cases, what's better to do is this. So you exit out on a failure as quickly as possible, because the failure case is the odd case, and there's no use in indenting your code for 100 lines.
So true.
You know, so, but sometimes the error case is the one that you handle. Whatever. I'm just saying, like, figure out what your case is instead of doing like these big, huge, like if 100 lines, else 1 line block, or if 1 line, else 100 lines. Just return out of it so it looks cleaner. Yeah. So, does this look like it's going to work to you?
Yeah, probably.
Man, you got a lot of faith.
I do.
I don't even remember what this does anymore. I think it works though.
It scrapes the form that you created, and if there's a problem with it, it returns an error.
Okay, so, but there's still one thing missing, which is on our form, we don't have a submit button. Okay. Okay, so let's go back here. Something's wrong. Something didn't parse correctly. Probably didn't backdent properly. So that looks right. Maybe I needed the space. I'm confused.
Is it the P with the dot?
Maybe there's like
problem.
maybe there's got to be another dot to end it. Jade documentation.
Should we look at form or paragraph?
Okay, filters. HTML.
Tags.
Tag text.
Let's try that.
Oh, okay. So the dot just needs to come at the end here, it looks like. That ends the block.
No, it just added it as text.
Okay, what am I missing here? Let's take a look at this again. Foo ASDF. Alright, what is going wrong? This paragraph, everything's indented. Once again, as an alternative, we may use a trailing dot to indicate a text block, for example.
Is there a space?
I don't know what's going on there. Let's just try copying this exactly verbatim and see what happens. Nope. Set, paste. And then we want to take these and then indent them a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. Didn't even.
Yeah, it looks like something's wrong with the parser there.
Let's use the.
Okay.
Down. That would be faster.
Yeah. So for this example, we'll just go back to the old ways.
Yeah.
That's a lot faster. That's weird. I wonder why the what the syntax error there is. If it's a different version. What? Stop it.
Remember, it's the form syntax that we're not doing right. You know?
Maybe.
Take out. Do the paragraph before the form. Try that.
Yeah. It totally could be because
it might be trying to read that and it's like, what is this thing? Yeah, try that. I bet that'll work better.
Yeah, and if that's the case, I'll try the dot stuff again. Alright, something is definitely weird here.
Do you need to do form space hashtag contact?
No, it should be, this should be correct.
Should we look at form?
This is my love. I love you so much. Peace and life. Oh!
There needs to be something that tells us it's the end of.
Thing here.
This is my home. I love it here so much. It needs to have an end there.
Yes. This is the problem. Like that. I bet this will work now. It's the little things.
Yeah.
Da 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 da.
So.
Okay, yeah, I don't even think it needed to have the trailing dot.
Cool.
I think that was just like
Just the
happenstantial.
indentation.
Yeah, just the indentation. Good. Okay, so
let's put in values and then.
okay, so first AJ O'Neill AJ6 at Gmail. Yeah, my number's definitely same. What a coincidence. Very interesting that I would have the same number as the example there. And something didn't get caught. Okay, requested module has not been defined. Interesting. Warning. Okay, so it was trying to tell me, but I wasn't listening. Those warnings, because of the way Ender does packages, like the warnings pop out. Be nice if I could get in touch with those Enders guys and get them to use CommonJS for the packages, because they're not too far off from it, and then everything would work as expected. But their package syntax is just a wee bit different. And so I have these superfluous warnings. What I need to do is just make a list of all the Ender packages that there are, and then just like exclude them. Or if the package says in itself that it's an Ender package, not put out the warning, and then the real warnings I would notice, like that I didn't install AHR2, for example. Okay, so I will do that. AHR2. And that works in Node as well, so it's got like a bunch of packages to abstract browser things for Node.
Okay.
Anyway, back to deployment. Maybe it will work this time, eh? Oh, I already forgot something else. Need to go to the JavaScript here, and here I'm going to get an event, and I need to cancel the event. There we go. Because otherwise the page will refresh when I submit a form, and that's not what I want. Okay, cool. Here I am. And I broke something else. Live coding.
Not there.
So much fun. Oh, maybe what I broke is that I'm replacing the form and everything else with the message. So it's doing what I told it to do. All right, and again.
Sweet.
Cool. When and then let me get back to the console over here so we can see if anything happens.
Start file and file.
Dang it. So it did not catch the submit event for some reason. Let's look and see. Contact form, submits. Let's just make sure that contact form exists the way that I believe it does in my heart. Okay. And I do put DB, submit. I'm just going to put that in. Why? Oh, again, same stupid reason as before. Because I am not waiting for it to be
The
ready.
DOM to load.
Yeah. Yeah, so alrighty. Hello again to all my friends. Together we play some rock and roll. Hello again to all my friends. Cool. Type error. Awesome. I don't know why in the world it would have a circular reference. But let's just take a peek. Oh, I know why it says it has a circular reference. Because back here, I needed to call .val on each of these. So I found the element, but I'm not getting the value of it.
Okay.
And actually, the HR, if I wanted to upload files, it handles file uploads.
Mm-hmm.
So I could actually do this. File is form.find input type equals file. Oops. Dot files. But we don't have any way to handle it on the other side. So, and then encoding that in JSON probably would fail, because it would try to convert it to it would detect that it was a file and convert it to a multi-part form, and we don't have a handler for that right now.
Right.
Okay. Anyway, back to here, and refresh, and my name, and send. And successful!
Sweet.
Okay, so now, if I look at /db,
Whoa.
ba-da-da-da,
Whoa. Sweet.
and then on my server, I have stuff I'm looking
great.
for.
Yes.
So there you have it, and I call it quits for now.